Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's your favorite paranormal investigator here. That was a little hot in my ear. I'll adjust the mic. Welcome to the show. My name's Tim Sedano, as it says so right here. This is Paranormal Insight, and on today's show, we're going to both do not really a review. I mean, we'll review it, and here's the review. The fantastic documentary, The Experiencers, if I can get it out. It's called The Experiencers, full disclosure. It's fantastic. There, review over. Let's dig into some of the details. Allow me to share a screen here real quick. It is written and directed by someone named Dan Alioto. And Dean, excuse me. It's right there, Tim. Read it. Dean Alioto. And he did a fantastic job putting this together. And as we move on here, we all know who that guy is. We'll get into him in just a little bit, but this is the title right there. The Experiencers, full disclosure. I think that thing's up there. I'm going to try and get rid of it. There we go. So this is the title of the film. This is where you kind of start off. But they go into a lot of different things. They even go into, very, very briefly, the Red Rockers experience, which is fan. So let me get back up here. So yeah, Sammy Hagar, he had an experience. He even wrote a song about it, and it was amazing. So I do highly recommend the documentary. One of the things I want to really kind of jump into is the various experiencers, hence the title, who have so much to contribute to this thing, including, they talk to a lot of great people. But the first people they talk about is, or one of the first, actually, they start off with this young lady where her and her sister had a shared dream, and there were two of them when they were little girls. And they're 1 year apart, and they look similar to one another, but you could definitely tell. It's weird, too, because they are dire opposites to each other. Kind of like my brother and me. I'm more, I don't know, I have a military background, so I kind of got that edge going for me. I'm also a filmmaker and a creative. He is also a creative, but he's a writer. And he's more rebellious than I am. Has always been. He's a tatted out dude. I don't believe in tattoos at all. That's not my bag. Just that's a personal thing. But so they talk to these two ladies here, and I'll briefly share that image. So this is the first sister they interview, and I'm going backwards trying to get her name. Okay, so she's describing this sensation. I don't want to use too much sound because I don't want to infringe upon these poor people too much, because they did a lot of hard work, and I'm not looking to give away the whole story. So anyway, I can't get her name. But this young lady and her sister have a shared dream, and it is incredible. And together on camera, they both go through the hypnoregression process. And I'll get into what's revealed with them a bit later on. At first, I want to talk about Betty and Barney Hill, because they do go into Betty and Barney Hill. And they are the first, at least technically, as they put it here in the film, first reported experiencers. And that's basically true. They came out with their story. They're already a hyper-dynamic couple. And I say that because back in the, what was it, 59, 60, 61, something like that, is when all this happened. And during that time, a white man, a white woman married to a black man was a huge freaking deal. Huge freaking deal. Just way out of left field. Wasn't done typically, but it was different times, as they say. But as we go into it, here's a good shot of them. I like this shot. I'll add it to the stage again. So this is a shot of them. That's their niece. The handsome couple, I think. I think they're a great couple together. But as they talk about the various, actually, they talk about the first time they were abducted, and the first and only time they were abducted, and it is phenomenal. The recount. Now, what? And we'll go into it briefly. So, Betty and Barney Hill. This is 1961, and this is animated. They took a look. See, you can see how animated the story is, but it's very well done because, yeah, it's animated, but I think they did the aliens especially quite well, and you'll get a look at them in just a moment. But let me backtrack. So they're driving home from Montreal. They had taken a little surprise vacation. Barney wanted to surprise Betty. And so whisked her up to Montreal, and they had a little fun, but a hurricane was blowing in, and they didn't want to get stuck up there, so they decided to drive home. And as they're driving home, Betty's looking out the window here, and she sees some weird bright light. That's her niece telling the story right there. Her name escapes me. But, and they're talking about their watches stopping here. So, and I'm kind of speeding through this a little bit. So, yeah, look at this. I'm glad they showed the dress. So, this is evidence that later comes into play when it comes to Betty and Barney Hill's story, because as we move along here, I'll get to the pertinent part in just a second. As we move along in the story, that dress is going to come into very prominent play. So, too, will Barney's scuffed shoes. I want you to take a really good hard look at this here. See if I can zoom in. I cannot, unfortunately. But see these scrapes here and over here? These were brand new shoes on the day in 1961. Spit and polished. I mean, Barney's former military. You know how we are about our boots and our shoes. So he was very keen on taking these very expensive shoes and taking very good care of them. And he has these scuffs on his shoes he can't initially explain. And mind you, their story largely is told through hypnoregression. Now, basically, here's what they remember initially, prior to hypnosis. They say, or Betty says, hey, pull the car over. I want to take a look at this weird object in the sky over here, because it's not like I've never seen a star do that before. And what it was doing is coming closer. So this just bright metallic object is emitting light, and they pull over. And once they pull over, they're suddenly back in their cars, or just outside their cars. I can't remember. There's a little disparity there for me. We'll probably discover it together as we go through the rest of the documentary. But I digress. So, they suddenly, after they return home, and mind you, you may have seen that clock winding, that little segment there. I kind of glossed over it, but they have like 4 hours of missing time. They're exactly where they picked up. Nothing's in the sky all of a sudden. But then when they get home, they really start piecing things together a little bit more. There's all this weird evidence. His scuffed shoes. Aha. Her torn dress. I think there's even burn marks elsewhere on it where it's suspected that they didn't realize the abductors, the aliens, as it would turn out to be, didn't realize you could just take the dress off. They were going to cut it off, and she stopped them, apparently. But there's these little fringed burn marks. They were just going to cut it up off her like you do with an injured patient. You don't strip the clothes off them. You cut them off. That's the procedure they're about to do. But she, apparently, and this is not from this particular documentary. This is from another report, a more complete documentary and report on their specific abduction story, where she says, no, the dress comes off. It's cool. You don't have to destroy my dress. And it was already partially torn because, well, I'll let her tell that story in a little bit. But, they're having all these issues. They pull over on the side of the road, and suddenly they have scuffed shoes, torn clothes, and Barney is depressed. He's melancholic, and he feels like he's under duress. And he is a vet. He's a World War II vet, but he came through, man. He made a life for himself when he came back. But now he's experiencing PTSD, or what will later become known as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, for those who don't know. And there's this doctor, Simmons or Simons. I'll find out just a little bit here, but so they go visit Dr. I think it's Simmons, and he's a hypno-regression specialist. And there he is right there. And they takes on their case, and he starts the session. And now Dr. Simmons was also, he specialized in helping vets, and that's him there, obviously. And this is a vet he was helping with dealing with post-traumatic events from the World War II. The World War II? Sorry. Anyway, he has a decades of experience handling this and getting soldiers back on track and dealing with their trauma through hypnosis and through regression. So he is the first guy that's recommended to them, and they go to him. And as they go to him, see there, this is the niece explain basically what I said. So as they go to him, he puts both of them under regression. And the regression tapes are, and you've heard the stories before, are, for me, emotionally just heart-wrenching. They really are. You can hear the palpable fear in their recall. You can hear and feel their fear. And Barney's Betty's no slouch. I mean, she's a tough old gal from the New England area, and every bit of woman, don't get me wrong, Betty had that going for her, but she was still tough as nails. I mean, you really kind of have to be to say, I love that man. I don't care if he's black, and I'm going to marry him anyway, especially in 1961. So Betty's no slouch. And then you got Barney. Barney's a World War II vet. Okay. He's seen stuff, man. He was in a couple of major battles. I think it was at Omaha Beach. I had an uncle who was at Omaha Beach. And it sticks with you, man. But I don't know, a lot of dudes over there, maybe not all of them, as we saw in that photo with Dr. Simmons, they just knew how to pull together and say, well, it happened back then, and we're moving on, I'm still here, and yada, yada, yada. I don't know, they just had tools available to them to deal with that stuff, but I digress. I'm very pro-vet and pro-vet services, and being an ex-military guy myself. So I get it, and I get the need for it. And but to hear Barney cry, this tough guy, he's a gentle soul, but he knew how to be the kind of soldier that's required when you're fighting the likes of the Nazis. And to hear him cry in fear is heart-wrenching. I switched my speakers to the laptop here, so you're going to hear Barney's words as this animation kind of helps recount what happened. And I may stop and start just to kind of trim the story a little bit for time, but give a listen. This is Barney in his own words as to what happened. As soon as I hit the button, were you having fun yet? Okay, Mac Pro speakers, here we go. Okay, got it.
I pulled over to the side of the road. Betty is trying to make me think this is the flying saucer. And I don't. I try to maintain control so Betty cannot tell I am scared. God, I'm scared. They won't talk to me. Who won't talk to you? The man. They're standing in the road. Did they have faces like other people? His eyes were slanted. I see it. Oh, his eyes were slanted. But not like a Chinese. I gotta get my gun.
Okay, so as that plays out, I want you to listen to the fear in his voice. I gotta get my gun. He's that scared that he has to rely on firearms to defend himself. He feels under attack. And I mean, for 1961, I'd feel under attack too, I suppose. I mean, you pull over because you think you see something. Oh, that's weird in the sky. And then it lands in front of you, produces these beings. I mean, maybe today's age, we'd be a little more open-minded about it and say, yeah, you okay? Need help? Who knows? But he's very frightened, as he says in his own words. And it is nothing short for me. I'm choked up a little bit just saying this. Heart-wrenching. Heart-wrenching. I feel so bad for what these people went through. And what they're further going to go through as this story continues. Again, as I said before, I will be doing a little bit of trimming on this story. If you want to watch the movie itself, it's available. I think it's available for free, too. Don't quote me on that. But, because I think it's on Prime. If you have Prime, you can go check it out. But, let's dig into the other part of his story and also Betty's story regarding the abduction.
What was Betty doing all this time?
She tried to start the car and won't stop. The medical exploded. And I think, well, I can't get away from it. If I get the car door open, I can run with the side. And come up and they open it for me.
This creature, this leader is telling me something. He's telling you something. How? How is he getting it to you? I can see it in his face. You see that move? Yes. No. Lips aren't moving. How could you be sure he was telling you that?
Look at that face. That's a face we've seen before in movies. Think Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Very close to that. Well, let's get off that image in case it's triggering everyone right now. But now we have telepathy. being used. His lips aren't moving, they say. Betty has an idea to run and hide in the woods once the car door opens, because apparently they're going to open the door for this lady, which is interesting. They'll open the door for the lady, but they'll cut her dress off. I mean, and this is where things kind of start to raise flags for me, not red flags in their story necessarily, but in the sequence of events. I think there was more happening between certain aspects of their story that they did not recall. Yeah. So, I found the alien depiction to be at least accurate enough. If you will recall that they showed Betty and Barney Hill's renderings, their own version of what they were looking at, and how the eyes were slightly tilted. They didn't really show that here in this alien face, and I'll put it back on the screen for you guys. So, yeah, they didn't really show that curve. I mean, it's kind of there a little bit. And I can see where they think, oh, it has an Asiatic aspect to it, especially here with this bridge. Because I think it's called the epicampal fold, and I'm not trying to be, a racist person, but it's called the epicampal fold, and there's a little flap of skin. Let's see if I can do it. That comes down. I used to be able to do this all the time. And it looks like that. I don't know if you can see my eye when I do that, but it's very hard to do, and it actually kind of hurts. But it actually broadens the bridge of the nose if I do that. So, and that's all it really is. It's just a fold of skin that changes the eye shape. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting to me. So it's called I think it's called the epicampal fold. And it was supposed to protect against a certain type, a high brightness situation. At least that's what a lot of people theorize, but it doesn't explain why it's stuck. And there is an ancient alien theory as to why that's stuck. And like, oh, we're going to, different tribes across the world, so to speak, were under the rule of different ancient astronaut leaders, I guess you could say, from the big Sumerian dudes. Anunnaki is the word I was looking for. So apparently they had leaders across the globe, and there were, they were taking these various tribes. They were doing the same thing. Okay, so they started out with their human experiments, so the story goes, in the Mesopotamian area, and they created basically that tribe of people, which would later become what were they called? We call them Arabs now, but they weren't Arabic then. They were called something else. Not Ottomans. Maybe Ottomans. I can't recall now. I'm so sorry, folks. I'm usually pretty good at that. But you know what I'm talking about. So the larger Mesopotamian area, but then these gods, these aliens, these Anunnaki, kind of spread out across the globe and said, well, I'm going to make my own version of these guys. And that's how we got the different races, the different human sections, for lack of a better term. I mean, that's basically it. If they had the hominids across the globe, right? And they just kind of took them and modified them. They came out with these different genetic aberrations, we'll call them. And they're minor aberrations. I mean, different melanin shades, different formations of the eyes, like the Asiatic epicampal fold. Asiatic, wow, aren't I very continental saying it that way? But yeah, so that's what the ancient astronaut theory it basically says, and you can follow Billy Carson and you'll look up what he has to say about that, because he has a ton to say about that. I think he even did a movie about it where it was like a docudrama, quasi docudrama, kind of explains that entire thing that he said he got from all kinds of sources across the globe, including resources in local universities that are free online that you can go and verify for yourself. Whether anyone's actually done that or not is beyond me. I just don't know. But still, the narrative he came up with, including something called the Pyramid Wars, because all these pyramids are across the globe and are all roughly in the same, equatorial lateral. Oh gosh, yeah. Anyway, same grid point across the surface of the earth. Anyway, actually, that's not entirely true, but most of them kind of hang around. So there's the ones in Egypt, and if you follow a horizontal line, so to speak, around the globe, you can find a lot more pyramids along that line. Although other pyramids are placed in other places, so that it doesn't really stand up. But I digress. So we have Betty and Barney Hill taking a peek at this guy for the first time, and let's clue into what else they have to say about that.
He said, "You don't have any reason to be afraid. We're not going to harm you." And they're taking me up to the arch. And I don't want to go on it. I don't know what's going to happen if I go on it.
Did you feel you were going to be attacked in any way? Hanging on the table.
The examiner unzips my vest.
Okay.
I lie down on the table.
That's very interesting, because in another documentary, she had to tell them to unzip the thing. So this is what I'm saying. I think they edited this for continuity and stuff like that, because I remember, maybe we have a Mandela effect on our hands, kids, but I remember specifically that they were about to cut it off, and then she said, no, use the thing in the back, it's a zipper. And she kind of half demonstrated it, and then the examiner took over, and yeah. Not that the examiner just suddenly did it. But let us move on.
On my back, and the examiner has a long needle in his hand. It's bigger than any needle I've ever seen.
And my file was open, and I thought, are they putting a cup around my private part?
And he takes a day, to my face, and I'm crying, and I tell her it's hurting. And the leader, he goes over and he puts his hand, runs his hand in front of my eyes, and he says, "I'll be all right. I won't feel it." And all the pain goes away.
Wow. If that doesn't make you feel something for these poor people. I mean, now, here's where things kind of fall apart for me more than anything else. Not that, again, I totally believe this happened to Barney and Betty Hill. Absolutely, unequivocally. There's too much proof, too much evidence left over to not believe them. For my take, and I'm an investigator, man. I kind of know what I'm talking about. I did real investigations for a while, and then I did private. I did do private investigations. Then I did paranormal investigations. Still do. So, and my training is such that I am trained in certain procedures and stuff like that. Here's where it puts up a flag, a question. So let me pose this question to you. Why does a species who has apparently interstellar, and we'll get into that in a bit, interstellar flight capability, and in a time and an era that we will later come to realize, at this time, Earth, us Earth guys, us Earth people, were already coming up with a non-invasive injection system called the jet injector. Uses air, psst, just like Star Trek. Remember Star Trek? Psst, into the neck, Bones and Kirk and all those guys, Dr. McCoy. Psst. Yeah, that was being made a reality. It was being researched at that time. May have been, even been in practice in the military in certain sectors. But, yeah. So if we had that, at least in development in 61, you'd think they'd implement something advanced, even if it was quasi-experimental. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Why doesn't an alien have better medical equipment? Why doesn't an alien have better medical equipment, especially if they're at least, let's call them 500 years ahead of us? That doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to stick a hypodermic needle into her belly button to see if she's pregnant. She'll get into that in a second. Because later on, the aliens will tell her, "Oh, we're checking we're doing the pregnancy test." And it is nothing short of very painful for her, obviously. But it doesn't make sense to me that an advanced species still relies on manual hypodermics, especially when Earthers are coming up with jet injectors. And they go both ways, too. You can inject stuff and take stuff out. You can take blood out with a jet injector. That confuses me. But I think an answer may lay in something I talked about with Tommy Cullum on his show, which will be coming out in a week or two. And I encourage you to go watch Tommy's show. That'd be fantastic. So Betty has her procedure, and she asked the leader, "Why did you do that?" And says, "It's a pregnancy test." And she didn't get why he was doing that. There's no pregnancy. There's no pregnancy test here in doing that, and it wouldn't actually become a practice for us people here on Earth to do a pregnancy test with a big long needle into the abdomen of a woman until the 70s, like literally 10 years later. Earth would be doing that. And I see right there again, there's that weird continuity break where hyper advanced species apparently still using hypodermic needles, whereas we're already by 10 years later using jet injectors. Makes zero sense to me. And further, the movie actually reflects this. Here's the still of the what they have to say, and I'll read it for those of you who are just listening. Such tests with needles known as amniocentesis became an accepted standard of prenatal care in the 1970s, more than a decade after Betty and Barney Hill's incident. I paraphrased that last bit because I misread it. And that's from the CDC. The CDC actually said that, or something very close to it. So we have aliens using hypodermic needles, doing procedures at least 10 years ahead of us. I don't know. that it's a weird thing to hang up on in the middle of an abduction story, but it does give me pause. And then the next part of this is what really kind of cements things for me. There's this wall on the ship or on the location, or presumably the ship, because they do see this thing land. And Betty has something interesting to say. I'll be right back. Had to attend to something real quick. Let's resume with Betty's take on things. This is pretty cool.
He went over, did something in the metal of the wall. There was an opening, and he pulled down a map. He asked me, had I ever seen a map like this before? It was an oblong map, and he said that the heavy lines were trade routes, and then the other lines, the solid lines, were places they went occasionally. The broken lines were expeditions. I asked him where was his home port. He said, where are you on this map? I looked and I laughed and I said, I don't know. So he said, well then, if you don't know where you are, there wouldn't be any point of my telling you where I am.
Now, that is probably one of the most flippant answers I could ever expect. I get the logic of a statement, but at the same time, is it going to kill you to say, oh, I'm from this planet? Who cares? Had Betty known things a little more precisely, never mind, this map is so interesting because it is a known star system to us here on Earth. We don't see it that way, but let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'll let the niece of Betty and Barney Hill kind of explain things in this, but we're going to hear about Marjorie Fish, an astronomer with NASA. Here we go.
Later, Marjorie Fish, a brilliant woman, took that star map and did years of research to try to find the stars that Betty had sketched. And then in 1971, there was a new astronomical catalog published. There were now 3 stars on the map that hadn't been there before. She added the new stars, and she had a match for Betty's star map.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Betty beat everyone by 10 years in figuring out what was going on. And I'm going to leave this image up here. Actually, I won't, because I have another image to share with you that is equally amazing. But first I got to do that and just hide it. But this is very cool. I found this super cool. So here, as I bring it up, we will see Betty's sketch, and we'll see what they call the reality. There's something more to this, and this is where it gets super interesting. Okay, so Betty's sketch at the bottom here. Trade routes. And on Tommy's show, I have to make a correction here. I said these are outposts out here. I was wrong. They go to occasionally. And then the dotted routes over here are stuff that they're looking, they have expeditions planned to, in 1961 anyway. But if we go up here to this map, we realize, at least Marjorie Fish realized, that we were looking at the zeta, the reticuli, the net in the nighttime constellation. It's in the southern declination of our skies, but we don't see it like this. We see it reversed. And if you look carefully, right here, Marjorie figured out where we were on that map. If Betty had known, who knows what the conversation would have been like. And so I want you to look at that right there. That is the sun. That's us. That's our star. Juxtaposed to all this stuff here. So they frequently visit, pardon my yawn, Alpha Mensa, us, Iridani 82, and Galiz 86. Now, one thing I'm going to do for you here, if I'm doing it correctly, and I'm going to have to do a little drawing here. There's the lines. Okay. Hopefully this shows up. Let me move this so I can interact with you guys a little bit better. So, okay, that's highlighting. I need to do now. Did I hit the button? I hit the button. Are we having fun yet? Lines. Maybe I have to do. Suddenly, I can't make this work. Okay, there it is. Okay, I don't know what color this is going to be. So let me choose red as a color. So we have these two stars here, right? If we connect, and I think I'm doing this correctly, those two stars and Gliese 86 and Gliese 59 together, that is the net that we see, the reticuli constellation in the sky. But you'll see it's oblong. For us, it's a little more diamond shaped. Okay, so let me undo all this. Oops, I goofed. Sorry. I hit the wrong button. So let me back up and see if I can. No, it followed all my moves. So okay, hold on. Let me just bring up a different picture. So that's what that box I drew is basically our net, I believe. So let me close this and I'll show you something else. And this is so cool because Miss Fish was a genius, to say the least. When I show you this, you are gonna freak out. Well, freak out, but nonetheless, it'll be pretty cool. It's so cool. This is so cool. Sorry, I'm very, very excited by to show this with everyone. Take a look at this. So again, you can kind of half make it out here. This is the reticulum, this star cluster here, this constellation. Basically, it's right next to the swordfish constellation, and this is the net that catches the swordfish in the story. But I'm going to zoom in over here because this is stellar. This is Zeta Reticuli. And you'll notice that whoever drew this map up actually said the alien's homeworld. Now I'm going to zoom back out. Okay, so here's A, or Zeta Reticuli 1, and here's Zeta Reticuli 2. Do you see it? If I can do a side comparison, I'll do it, but I don't think I can. And these are just 4 stars in that larger thing. So remember this, A and or 1, Zeta 1, and B, Zeta 2. Remember that, and I'm going to bring up that other map now. Okay. This is so neat. I'm so excited about it. Sorry. I'm a giggly little boy when it comes to this stuff. You want to see me nerd out? You're seeing me nerd out. So here we are once again. Zeta Reticuli A, or 1, and Zeta Reticuli 2, or B. And that's us right there. So, between this and the other map, Ms. Fish, Marjorie Fish, figured out that it was the Zeta Reticuli star cluster, or Zeta Reticuli star cluster, or, constellation that was a part of that. And she only got one more star, and I think it was this one to kind of, it was one of these other extraneous ones that didn't make up the net, the original net, and that clued her in. And here's the thing. This is where it gets cool. It is reverse, because remember, in our map, from our perspective, this is up here and this is up here. So, in essence, they switch positions. Not only do they switch, so it's upside down, it's also reversed. So, it's all over here. Or, I'm sorry. It's reversed. It's upside down and reversed. Because Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 are over here. Actually, can I do that? I don't think I can do that. If I can I flip things? I don't think I can. Oh, that's so irritating. Oh, I can. I can flip them horizontally. So, this is half of it. This is only half the stuff. And then, you got to invert it, which is insane. And Marjorie figured that out. Good for you, Miss Marjorie. You did a very good job. Figured out what the perspective was. And here we are. Isn't that great? Isn't that fantastic? I think that's one of the coolest things in the world. Just amazing. Beg your pardon. I'm yawning. Oh gosh, that's just so cool. So, this map, in other words, that Betty saw, and she says he pulled it down, which is interesting. But if it's a touch screen and it looked like he pulled it down, different story. Because why would they have physical pull-down maps like they did on old submarines? I mean, they come in handy if you lose power and stuff, but if you lose power in space, I mean, you are extra hosed, I would think. So we have here an alien star map from their perspective, which is approximately 39 to 40 light years from us. Able to traverse that distance, presumably faster than light, to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, what's the point? Because that's 80 years there and back. Maybe they live longer lives and they can afford an 80-year round trip. But I'm going to say probably not, because I don't know. Why would you risk an entire crew, even if they do have a longer lifespan, on that trip that you go to sometimes? Remember what you said. These lines here, let me zoom in. These lines here, common trade routes between Zeta 1 and Zeta 2. The solid lines out to not only us, but Alpha Monet, 82 Eridani, and Galiz 86. You go there sometimes. Maybe you have an outpost there. In fact, that was my supposition on Tommy's show, and it's incorrect, and I apologize for that thing. And then the rest of this is pretty cool. And who's not to say that they haven't completely filled this map in with solid lines, at least, and made more progress in their visitations. It's so cool. So, again, this map is from the perspective of these guys right here, way over here. This is Earth's perspective of their little star system. And I will zoom in so you can see that. So it's from that, the map we saw before is from this planet's perspective. Isn't that fantastic? That's so odd. I find that completely just extra cool. But the story doesn't stop there. It goes on about how they were, when they wake up, they're back in the car, and we kind of know the story from there. Oh, they had their dog with them, Delcy. Yeah, and the dog we don't know. They never saw the dog on the ship, but this poor dog is curled into a ball, half under the seat. Remember, bench seats back then in the cars. In the tight little ball. That's according to Barney himself. And they both look back at one another and they're completely elated, and they see the ship. And I'll show that part. They see the ship take off. Oh, look at the funny little moon. And there it goes. This is an animation. I don't know if it was that wobbly, but isn't that something? And that's essentially the Barney Hill abduction in a nutshell. Animation notwithstanding. I mean, I'm glad. It surprised me that they got it done like they did. Now, they do an interesting thing where they say, well, what's the case for abduction? Why do it? I thought that was fascinating. And they have an expert, and they say, well, if I'm an alien, I'm gonna do I'm gonna do pretty much everything these aliens did, and that's check out their physiology. I'm going to ask them questions to see if they're communicative at all. I'm going to basically assess them for intelligence and all that fun stuff. Kind of like what we do with our lower animals here on Earth, including tagging them. We'll get into a tagging story here in the documentary. Again, fantastic job. The animation was super appreciated. I'm kind of glad they went with a more cartoony, for lack of a better term, animation versus a more realistic animation, because I feel that would be somehow a harsh reality for the audience to really kind of take in. So I can appreciate where they were coming from. Remember, these are stories, so you really have to separate, in a lot of cases, a memory and or a story from the past from the story being told in the present. And I think they did a good job with that. Next up, we talk about a man named Travis Walton. If you don't know Travis Walton's case, he's the guy who wrote the book Fire in the Sky, of which there was a TV series made, and it was frightening. Was it necessary to make these things that frightening? Well, we've always had a penchant for turning the alien monster into the bad guy and having us win. War of the Worlds, Alien to a degree, Star Wars, although that was kind of human on human stuff, but there were a lot of aliens involved. Okay, Star Wars is a bad example, but Star Trek to a degree too, but that kind of all got fixed and everyone became friends, more or less. But I'm so sorry. Space Above and Beyond. I wish I had posters for these things to put up, but that was like a one-off. It was one season, but it really asked a really interesting question about who was here on Earth first before humans. And apparently it was this race of reptilians, according to that story, where they said we were around when you were still crawling around in caves, and we left because we were losing all the heat and methane in the atmosphere that we breathe a little more easily than oxygen and nitrogen. And we came back to reclaim our world. That was the story of Above and Beyond, Space Above and Beyond. And sorry if I spoiled it for you, but it's worth a watch. It's a great little drama. It really is. But let's go back to Snowflake, Arizona, in the lumber yards over there in 1975, where we have Travis Walton. And he tells us his story. And again, I'm going to kind of paint. I think I went away for a bit. I think I hit a button wrong. My apologies for that. That's embarrassing. Anyway, let me get back on track here. But here we have Mr. Travis Walton. And again, I'm going to scan through this. But he is, again, former forestry worker. He's in a truck with his buddies. They're cutting wood out in the forest, and it is time to come home. And they see this light in the forest, and they think, "Was that a star? What's going on?" And then the light gets brighter, and they go, "Oh my gosh, is the forest on fire?" No, it's something different. And they see this big metallic object with a fiery glow to it. And so Travis, being the the gung-ho badass he is, and I'll show it again, he dashes out of the truck and goes to take a look at it. And he's looking at it, and there's weird flashes and stuff, and his buddies in the truck are getting super scared. And so he's hiding behind this fallen log, and his buddies are getting scared, and they're saying, "Come on, let's go." And so he stands up to leave, and let's see if they show it. Yeah, they do. Boom! He's hit with a pulse of light and goes flying like 20 feet. And as his friends would say, he fell like a sack of meat, motionless. They think he's dead, and they take off. Wow. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? So they take off, and they try hard, and they go to the sheriff, and they said, something's going on out there. Our friend was killed, and we left him there. And, they tell him the story about the saucer, and the sheriff goes, "Really? Saucer? Sure. This sounds a little suspicious to me, gentlemen," and it turns out all these dudes in the truck are now under suspicion of murder. The murder of Travis Walton. And they said, "Look, we don't expect you to necessarily believe us, but we didn't do anything. You give us whatever tests you want. Polygraph, whatever." So they polygraph every single one of those guys, like 4 or 5 of the guys who were in the truck that night. Polygraph every single one of them, and every single one of them passed, telling very nearly identical stories. And I say very nearly because there's always one guy forgets one thing, and another guy doesn't, because especially the stress of the situation. It's pretty common, actually, when you're interviewing witnesses or even grilling potential suspects. Not everyone remembers every single detail. Except the basics of the story line up perfectly, and the polygraph, however flawed it may be as a device for telling the truth, said that these gentlemen were not lying. Okay, different situation. Polygraph says they're not lying. Like, sheriff kind of has to take that on faith. I mean, it was considered a reliable enough machine to eliminate guilt, at least on paper. So suddenly the search is on for Travis Walton, the body of Travis Walton. Now they start where the guy said he was last time they saw him. Not there. And you probably know the story. So a little search becomes a bigger search. They go from like 5 or 6 guys, local guys, to like half the county looking for Travis. Then they bring in dogs. Then they bring in helicopters and planes, and they're out there searching for something like 3 or 4 days. I think hearing what Travis has to say next in his own words is pivotal. So let's listen to what he has to say in his own words. This is again from the documentary.
After losing consciousness, the very next memory that I had was a foggy sort of perception of where I was. The pain I was feeling led me to believe that I somehow got hurt in fleeing and that they had taken me to the hospital. And so when my vision cleared and I was finally able to focus, I could see that these definitely were not doctors, that this were these strange creatures looking at me, and I instantly became hysterical. It's not easy to talk about. It was very claustrophobic. I was having a lot of difficulty breathing, and I associated this feeling of suffocation with the faces of these beings. To this day, in my entire life, that was the greatest fear I've ever experienced. These small beings, they were all the same size, cooperating and moving sort of in unison, led me to think that they were probably telepathic to each other and attempting to be so with me. But it was my neurological injury of being hit by this beam, this craft, that made it to where they couldn't effect some mind control sort of a thing. And something that adds to that was the brainwave scan that I had when I was returned. It showed evidence of some anomalous patterns that later disappeared.
So these anomalous patterns that they show here, he was knocked unconscious by the beam, probably suffered some sort of concussion, and here he is. It's reduced, but nonetheless he's concussed. And that's a fascinating little tidbit, because we, up until Travis's story, and mind you, these are suppositions. He's not a doctor, but he's spoken to doctors, especially getting a brain scan. You don't really have a choice. But to deal with doctors, so they're telling, and he's just relaying the information that they're telling him. In that, so he was concussed, and the concussion was fading, but apparently, and this is where things get a little dicey for me, in that you have this advanced species that can knock you down with a beam, because they all saw the beam. It was right out of Star Trek, man, where you could see the beam. That's pretty impressive in its own right. If you know anything about physics, that's rare. When you have a concentrated beam of something, you don't normally see it. Even laser beams. I mean, they'd have to cut through a foggy room in order for you to see it. And maybe conditions were such as the temperature was dropping that they could see such a beam, but we don't really know. Nonetheless, the beam packed force to catapult him 20 foot in the air. He hits the ground hard, goes unconscious immediately, is obviously concussed according to the brainwaves, and then suffers, his brain starts healing, but not enough for these creatures to actually affect him, which is super interesting to me because, if you ever get captured, horrible advice, don't do this, but last ditch effort maybe, you don't want to be mind controlled or spoken to with a bunch of aliens, wrap your head against the nearest wall and hard as you can tolerate it, if not more. Try not to crush anything and concuss yourself. There you go. End of mind control. At least for a bit. So he's seen these creatures. And this is what's happening to him. Mind you, he says, the next thing I remember is, to my knowledge, he had to be regressed to remember this. So he's coming at it from the new timeline that was, I shouldn't say new timeline, I should say the more complete timeline of his experience. Because initially it was like, I was out in the forest and then suddenly I woke up also out in the forest. Like a lot of abductees who have been taken and put back. So I'll let him continue to tell his story.
My anxiety about subsequent bad health effects, that there would be some sort of premature aging or cancer or radiation sickness, some sort of bizarre infection. None of that materialized. On the contrary, I didn't get sick at all. I never called in sick one time in 40 years. Is that proof that they did some kind of repairs that might have resulted in a little bit of a tune-up or a health benefit? Possible. Is it proof? No. I try to live a healthy life. It could have been due to that, but it was certainly the opposite of coming down with bad effects. I'm constantly confronted by people who have all the answers and they want to tell me who these beings are and what they represent. I don't think anybody really knows that, and intentionally so. I think these beings are holding back on that kind of information. I don't believe in the idea that these beings have been for several hundred years creeping around trying to come up with a way to take over. That just doesn't make sense. If they felt nothing for us, it would be very simple to eliminate us. There wouldn't be dogfights with our fighter jets and their craft in the sky. Way superior to that level of combat or hostility. I just don't think it the way it is.
Okay, so that is a fascinating point that he makes. And it is also a point that Dr. Greer, who hits 50% of the time for me as far as his experiences and what he brings to the table and the people he has on his team and the witnesses he has brought forth. While I tend to believe the witnesses more than anything, some of his stuff gets a little out there, metaphysical. Maybe he knows what he's talking about, maybe he doesn't. I know he and my Uber boss, Joe Montaldo, don't necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of things. So I kind of have to take Dr. Greer with the more of a grain of salt than I would say Joe Montaldo, because Joe's relayed his experiences to me on this channel, on this podcast, in front of all of you as well, and has really put together some very, very compelling evidence. One thing Dr. Greer says that I agree with, that Joe Montaldo also, I guess reluctantly, agrees with, because they're, I don't know, I can't really speak to the relationship. To call them frenemies, to quote an old term, is potentially on target, but it would be... It's interesting. He says, listen, they're trying to back a narrative that the aliens are the aggressors. Dr. Greer's been saying that very recently on social media. That they're trying, the governments of the world, or the elites, or whoever, are trying to paint that picture still, that the aliens are the aggressors. Not according to our last person. Now, yeah, they've hurt people in the interest of their science and discovery, although I still find it very interesting that they're using 19th and 20th century technologies when they are so advanced and they don't even need it. But I digress. So, and yet still being able to bolster the guy's health, and never had a sick day since then. Top of my health, I take care of myself anyway, but I mean, fascinating, to say the least. But aliens are the aggressors. Well, that makes really good cinema, and I said earlier in the podcast that we have all kinds of different enemies that we face, trying to make us humans the good guys, the resistance, if you will, to this oppressive alien invasion. I'm watching something else right now that speaks to that, and it's a twofold invasion. It's really freaking complex. If you've ever seen the show Extinct, you know what I'm talking about. Recommend that show too. But let's get back to our movie, the documentary, I should say. It's fantastic. I really did enjoy this. You know what, though? Before we jump into that, let's take a little break for some station identification and a couple of commercials. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. This is the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 in the Gulf Coast. UPRN talkradio.com. Esoteric programming at its finest.
Long ago in the ancient world, the Tribus Omnis Lux, later known as the Tridents, were celebrated heroes, defenders of humanity against unspeakable monsters. Today, they continue that sacred duty in secret, hunting the dark evils that lurk just beyond the shadows. They are the Trident of Light.
Introducing Story TV, enabling true creative freedom for independent creators. Search an ever-growing library of fantastic festival winners, including Blaney Tucker's Ghost and the Monster Hunters of the TOL. Free to enjoy at lower resolutions. Pay $5 per month for 1080 and full K presentations to support the artists you enjoy. Your monthly contribution actually goes to the filmmakers themselves. Support independent film. Support Story TV. Check out our Patreon. Get deeper behind-the-scenes insights. Also, tips into being a better paranormal investigator and other fascinating content. Follow us on Instagram at paranormal.insight. Stay informed on upcoming shows, see what paranormal trends we're following, and help us reach 50,000 followers by liking, following, and sharing. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at paranormal_insight. Click the Live tab to see our latest videos. I just realized I've been muted this whole time, and I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try that one more time. This is Dr. George Church, as it says right there. He is the father of synthetic biology. And I'm so sorry I did that to you guys. And he basically created a lot of the more modern genetic research we do, including use of CRISPR. So George says, this is where things come from. We don't really know what aliens look like per se, despite, do they look like ETs? Do they look like the aliens? Do they look like the guys from District 9? Do they look like the Avatar aliens? Probably. I mean, we actually have stories that span all this stuff. And I'll jabber on for a moment or two while I get to his more relevant contribution to the story, which is to say, talking about aliens and stuff like that, and where we stand in the whole alien thing. And this is interesting because this kind of talks about how they put it. Well, you know what? I'll shut up and let them tell us. How's that? Hit play, Tim.
So if I'm one of these creatures is visiting Earth, I'm most likely, I would say, a time traveler or an interdimensional traveler. There's really so many possibilities. It'd be lovely to get a little more information to limit those possibilities.
Now, with regard to that particular notion, I couldn't agree more. In fact, that's my largest complaint in the UFO file dumps from the U.S. government. And because, yeah, sure, we've heard a lot of these stories, and we have a lot of stories confirmed now thanks to these files. Not only the visual evidence, but the documented evidence. And thankfully, for the most part, it's not a redaction farm. It's all there. I went off a couple weeks ago on one document. I meant to review the whole thing, but I got hung up in my own little dissertation on why 1953 government people were bad. And I stand by what I said, but I could have treated it a little more better. It just could have been better on my part. But that still doesn't take away from the fact that he put something out there very, very compelling. Not compelling, but, something noticeably absent. Where are the alien visitors? Where are their pictures, at least? Where are their interviews? We have a couple of them out there. Most of them have been disproven. Alien autopsy, fake or real. What species are there? We know we've had witnesses to a bunch. They seem to be seeing roughly the same type of creatures in this particular exploration, sticking with the short grays or something along those lines. But I think that's largely where the information dump stops. Documentation of reports Absolutely. Documentation on how the government is handling said reports. Yes, we have that. That's what I went off on a couple weeks back. Don't have a single live alien photograph or video at all. Maybe it's coming in dump 4. We don't know. I shouldn't call them dumps because it sounds like I'm talking about poo, but I'm not. You know what I'm talking about. The release. Oh boy, that sounds even worse. But anyway, yeah, I think that's chiefly what's missing from these documents. And then the doctor goes on, Dr. George there goes on to further puts a further supposition out there. And it basically, and this is kind of where a lot of his stuff falls apart for me. I mean, yes, he's a genetics expert. He could probably do a far better job of explaining what these creatures likely look like, as opposed to what witnesses have said. Although I would think that the witness testimony, since they match and they look like the creatures we've seen so far, more or less, kind of have an idea what they look like already, and he's kind of superfluous to this thing. I like his take, though. In that he says, well, we don't know if they're extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional, which has been a more recent development. Oh, they're from an alternate dimension. We've heard the story before, but that doesn't really answer our questions, does it? Where are these guys from? Well, we know they're extraterrestrial at the very least. At least some of them are. There's no reason to go through another dimension just to get to Earth unless that's a weird shortcut. That's their FTL process. They enter a dimension or pass through part of a dimension. You've heard the term underspace or subspace. Well, that would be one way to do it, is to enter a subspace domain and then find where it exits. It probably will not be the same distance. It'll probably be a shorter distance because you get the quantum mechanical stuff, and when you're dealing with subspace, and so you could shorten, like, how should I put this? In a linear sense, as we experience space and time, stepping through a portal, a subspace portal, for example, that goes from Zeta Reticuli to Earth, whether you step through or fly your ship through or whatever, for us, not unlike Doc Brown's time experiment. Remember that? He sticks his dog in the car and powers it by remote control. For Einstein, the dog, it took him literally 1 second. But we perceived it as 1 minute because we were outside that jump. So that jump doesn't necessarily have to be a ship flying through space at a faster velocity, a physically faster velocity, where it obscures or passes over or glosses over linear time. Same thing goes for a portal that can go from Zeta Reticuli, 40 light years away, to here, in roughly next to nothing. That's subspace, basically. And I'm simplifying a few things. There are energy requirements to pull this off, but seems like they got that licked. They can master anti-grav and all the rest of it. I'm so sorry, excuse me. They talk about the possibility of origins of these species, and I don't necessarily follow everything they put out there, including one guy's, they call it extraterrestrial theory. I'll let them talk about it, although I don't necessarily agree with it. Okay, here we go.
Once I had this sort of mental image, I became very interested in the question of UFOs and started to follow the work of Stanton Friedman and others who are researching it from a very scientific perspective to understand how others are looking at this. What can we learn through the lens of science with regard to this question and all the mysteries that surround it? The main reason I believe that these are simply future humans or extraterrestrial descendants is because if we look at the long history of hominin evolution, the main trends are an increase in brain size and reduction in our facial anatomy, or a shift toward orthognathism, as we call it. That has occurred in concert with standing upright. Our heads had to rotate down to see where we were going once we became bipedal 6 to 8 million years ago. Doing that, it caused our basic cranium to flex.
Okay, I'm going to stop him there. And here's why. The idea, and this is an idea that's been floated before. I do believe that there is, at least with some of these craft and some of these individuals, entities, if you will, or if you prefer, being potentially from the future, and they're human. However, for me, that doesn't track. The evolutionary thing doesn't really track. And no, it's not because of my religious stance. It's not even because of my scientific stance. Evolution does have its place in science. Absolutely it does. Does it happen as he thinks it does? I don't think so. I don't think a multi-million year evolution comes into play necessarily. I think, again, we kind of have to borrow and and it is cherry picking. I'll grant you this when I say this, but I only have 2 hours on this show and I don't have time to really get too into all this stuff. But put as simply as I can say it, let's for a minute say that ancient astronaut theory proves to be true. We were going along in an evolution. These beings came down, these Anunnaki, and seized upon us as the perfect toy to experiment with, beings to experiment with, and like Dr. George does, a little bit of genetic manipulation, 1 or 2 generations, you could probably speed grow these things if you really were so inclined, and especially if you have the ability to traverse the stars with that level of ease as the Anunnaki were reported to have. I don't think spitting out a modern human prototype with a few altered chromosomes and such is going to be that much of a task for them. So, making evolution, long-term evolution, part of our evolution into a future, an alien-looking future individual or entity is, I think, wildly suppositional. And while he can talk about basal brain pans expanding and contracting and all the rest of it, expanding. That doesn't really answer a lot of questions because you're still going to have to wait. Okay, if it took us 8 million years to go from a simple monkey-like creature to a more pronounced modern human, I don't think they're from that far in the future at all. And witnesses and experiencers have so much as said so that they're from another place. Now, again, there is an element to the whole UFO phenomenon where there is a time travel effect. That's pretty obvious. Rendlesham Forest is my go-to all the time. One of the soldiers is taken into that crap, that diamond thing I call the time kite, because it has this temporal aspect to the story, where he's taken in, he's sitting inside this thing, and he shouldn't be able to, so you have this TARDIS effect happening. Where it's larger on the inside. These little glowing orb robotic drone things, and they're little things like that big around, are buzzing around him. They talk to him telepathically. They say, "Hey, don't be afraid. We're just here checking to make sure the humans race is on the right path, because we were concerned that there was going to be some weird deviation in the past. But we're human too, essentially." Apparently, this was being communicated to him remotely through these little buzzing lights. Because he never reported a pilot, and it seemed like it was largely just a technological shell for these things to operate in. So the interior, though bigger, was also seemingly kind of compressed from what I recall from his regression statements. Interesting stuff. So I don't necessarily believe that the Greys are us from 100 million years in the future or whatever it is. Not for me. Not for me. It doesn't make too much sense. So we're going to move beyond him and get right into the true thing. We're going to look at, the lawyer. His name is Terry Lovelace. And in 1977, in a place called Devil's Den Park, Arkansas, is where his story begins. And I'll let him tell it because he tells it probably better, shorter than I could. So let's get into that.
A friend and I decided to take a camping trip. We drove into Devil's Den State Park, and we came up on a hill, and when we crested it, it opened up into this gorgeous meadow. On the horizon were 3 stars in a tight little triangle. Each star was almost as bright as the North Star, and it moved. We were excited, and we were, whoa, and we're watching this thing. And that's when I felt this feeling of calm wash over me for the first time. I don't know how much time passed, but I believe it was about 4 hours. Our watches had both stopped. They were mechanical watches. They both stopped around 2:40. And my friend was on his knees peering out the tent, and I could see there were these flashes of lights. I could see tracks of tears down his face. And all that feeling of calm and apathy that I felt earlier was gone, and there was nothing now but abject terror. I got to my knees, and I pulled back my flap of the tent, and I look out, and I noticed 2 things. The craft that had been 3,000 feet above us had now descended, and is just 30 feet over the meadow. And I noticed what I thought first to be children walking around the meadow. And I asked Toby, I said, "Toby, man, what are these kids doing out here in the middle of this meadow in the middle of the night?" And he said, "Man, those ain't no little kids, Terry."
Wow. What a story. What a story. I mean, and I say story, but it's a recounting, man. It's really hard to lie under hypnosis. Really, like, damn near impossible. But he would go on to say that during his regression, he recalls that there were men, and they have a little animation to back it up, with crew cuts helping the aliens. And this is all in the background. And they wouldn't acknowledge him. He kept saying, hey, help me out. So apparently there was some human interaction. So yeah, he's saying, hey, help me out. And they're interacting with these aliens like it's nothing. And they wouldn't acknowledge him. Wow. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, we have tons of time. I'm sorry, I thought we were way ahead of where we were. So let's continue on with the story. So our friend Terry here is flabbergasted to see Earthers, that's my term, humans, working with these aliens. And, yeah, I would be too. It's like, wait, hold on. These guys are supposed to be on our side. And they definitely have a militaristic style to them. They got the crew cuts and the flight suits and all that fun stuff. I mean, how would you feel? I don't know about you, but I feel a little betrayed. Having been abducted in such a way. And mind you, this is all recounted under regression because for him, hey, look at that weird triangle thing 3,000 feet up in the air to waking up in the tent, seeing the same craft 30 feet overhead with a bunch of little aliens running around in the meadow near your campsite. And then you get regressed and you see soldiers, or at least people who look like military personnel, working with the aliens, ignoring your pleas for help. So you gotta ask, what's going on? What's going on? Terry's story gets a little more involved. At this point, we're going to hear about another alien group. Besides these basic grays we've been seeing throughout the story. And I'll let Terry tell it.
When they took me into the room and did the medical experimentation on me, there was a insectoid-like creature, maybe 7 feet tall. So there were a couple of different types of entities, and I think that they were all working in concert. I have an opinion about the grays that I should add here, at least the ones that I came in contact with. I don't believe that they are sentient beings like you and I are.
Yeah, he picks up on something very intriguing here. Yeah. Forgive me, I made a little editing faux pas, but so you may hear some repeat info.
That I should add here, at least the ones that I came in contact with. I don't believe that they are sentient beings like you and I are. I think there may be a combination of AI, nanotechnology, maybe quantum computing, but I don't think that they're living sentient beings.
Well, that would fall in line with other reports and other witnesses speaking almost exactly the same thing. Some being told, even, it's like, oh yeah, you don't have to, you can kind of ignore the little guys. They're made, sometimes they malfunction. So biomechanical individuals, androids, if you will, cyborgs might be a little more accurate. However, at least by our definition, a cyborg still has the bulk of its humanity intact when they're, in our science fiction, converted to machines to one degree or another. So take that into consideration. The documentary goes on to explore various ideas built on that and how it makes sense for these alien creatures, whether, a byproduct of exploration, that maybe they didn't have enough personnel, or maybe going to these other worlds was proving to be too dangerous, So they created and sent out these artificial beings to handle the bulk of the heavy load. And if you have, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. If you have the technology and the inclination to not only build these creatures, you would probably make them capable, to one degree or another, of communicating the way you're used to, which would be, at least as far as we've heard so far, telepathically. So that's worth taking into consideration. One of the next people we're going to hear from is a lady who goes by, well, I'll let her tell you. That's fine. And she also goes into why she prefers the term experiencer versus abductee.
I prefer experiencer. I've never liked the word abductee. I don't know why. It kind of creeps me out. Contactee sounds a little 50-ish, 1950s weirdo. I had experiences. My name is Debbie, and I'm an experiencer.
All right. So Debbie has one of the rare experiences, mostly because she is a woman. Not that there haven't been other female abductees, but in that female abductees have been, because they are women, have had an extra added experience. And she goes into that. And it is fascinating, at the same time a little disturbing, and a little nothing. It is disturbing. And also heart-wrenching. I'm not a parent, but I have little cousins and nieces and nephews and the like, and they're actually, they're not little anymore. But anyway, you get my point. I mean, you do not want to see your child or children react against someone they should trust, and with fear or apprehension. I had, and I'll relay this prior to her talking about her experience, that when I was babysitting one time, it was this little game, this little cousin of mine he used to play, where we would try and scare each other. So he just had this thing. It was like, boo! And I'd pretend to be scared, and I'd run away, and then I'd get him back. Boo! Oh, one time I kind of did too good of a job. I laugh now. He doesn't even remember this, by the way. He doesn't even remember this, but I got him good. And he was so he was afraid of me for like 2 weeks. He wouldn't come and play with me at all. He'd stay in his room. He'd eat lunch in his room. He wouldn't hang out with me at all. It's because I scared him so bad. And I had to, with his mom, sit down with him and say, listen, buddy, we had our game. We were playing the game, and I guess I played a little too hard, and I'm really sorry about it. And he said, he didn't look me in the eye at all. I can tell I hurt him. Emotionally speaking. He says, that's okay. I never felt worse in my entire life. Oh my God. That poor little kid. But this young lady here has an experience that is unique to women in general. So a few men have experienced this as well, but for some reason, men tend to. Okay, right. I skipped a spot. Okay. So sorry, Travis is saying something that this lady says something. So let me get there real quick. Okay, she's going to come in and she's going to speak to something. I cut out the first couple of words. She says, when this entity.
He looked at me. He seemed surprised that I was so upset. He kind of cocked his head at me a little bit, and then all of a sudden I got hit with this emotion bomb, and it was as if every emotion that a human could.
And I forgot to show you what's happening. Let me put the screen up. So, again, she's in bed, and these guys are standing over her, and the alien, doesn't understand the emotional response she's having, so he runs this emotion bomb protocol on her and hits her with all of it. Nope, hit the wrong button again, Tim.
He was blasting at me in some lame attempt to feel something like for me.
Now, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to pause right there. We'll get back to it, I promise. For my money, he was trying to identify the emotion she was feeling. So these are emotions I'm aware of. Which one are you feeling? Give me, it's like, give me happy face or a sad face. That's my interpretation. I know that she experienced it. She would better understand it, but from an outside perspective, it would seem like if you hit someone with an emotion bomb and you just filter through all these emotions, is it sad? Is it envy? Is it, this is very apparently very what's that called? An analytical mind is going to go, oh, let's see if we can identify this in something I'm familiar with. Sometimes autistic people do this. It's part of their training is when it comes to emotional recognition. And there's actually faces that go along with certain emotions. We saw this in The Accountant. Ben Affleck's character was autistic, and we saw some of his progress and training on recognizing emotion. So, as an example, but I know outside of that, this is actually done to one degree or another. So, let's get back into her story.
Experience happened in June of 1977.
In his story.
Steven Spielberg's movie Close Encounters came out in November of that same year. It was 30 years before I felt comfortable enough to watch the movie. But
30 years from 77 is 2007, kids. So he waited 30 years to see it because he was so traumatized by his own experience.
I was struck by a number of parallels. I was absolutely blown away by the fact that he portrayed these men in flight suits. They weren't tan, but there was obviously an exchange of men and women and aliens working in concert.
Okay, I should pause here because I skipped over the part where he said the little gray guys are there, but then there was this taller pink guy along with the soldiers in tan flight suits.
Toward a common goal. And that's kind of the takeaway from Spielberg's movie is all of these entities working in concert towards some common agenda. And God, I'd love to know what that agenda is.
And he makes a very good point, because if all these species are working together and some of them are us, what is the point? Now, on Tommy's show, who you'll see that episode in a week or two on his channel, Tommy Cullum, Let's Get Freaky podcast, I was on there, and we went over this a little bit, but he asked the question of me, why do you think this is? And I said, well, here's what I've heard, and I'll express this here too. And this is both official and unofficial statements I've been privy to. And when I say unofficial, I mean stuff we've all seen on the internet and interviews and documentaries and such. When I say unofficial, stuff I overheard that I probably wasn't supposed to know about, but that was 30 years ago, so, hey. P.S. I love myself. I am not suicidal, and please don't kill me for revealing this. And besides which, you could probably say, "Oh, that guy's nuts." But here's what it comes down, and it's a darker version of something we all learned from Star Trek II. What did we learn in Star Trek II? One of the first lines exchanged between Spock and Kirk after the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Please don't sue me, Paramount. Or Paramount. Who owns Paramount now? I can't remember. Just don't sue me, please. I'm a fan. I'm helping you guys out. Spock and Kirk speak to philosophy and speak to the order of the universe in order to better serve it. And Spock says something to the effect of, "I need not tell you what you already know so well, that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one." Now, Tommy asked me, why do you think all this experimentation is happening on humans? And I took him down a bit of a long path. I'll shorten it for you guys. You recall the Eisenhower thing in 1954. He goes to Travis Air Force Base. He meets with 2 different alien delegations and strikes a deal with them. Not long after that, huge UFO flaps everywhere. We're told, oh, it's swamp gas, reflected Venus, and yada, 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 all the other crazy things, thermal inversions, and the like. Never mind. Okay, so Hynek said a bunch of that. He recanted of the bulk of it, though, in his later books, which I'm super proud of him for. But going into why, think about where we were from the alien perspective. We're playing with fission. Okay, we have 2 bombs that we detonate over Japan, Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Not in that order, I don't think. Now they're super low yield comparatively. They were, I think, at or just below 1 megaton. So enough to do a lot of damage and fricassee people and turn them into shadowy salt stains or whatever on the walls. And send a bunch of other people to their graves in prolonged agony from radiation poisoning. Imagine you're an alien race and you see that happen. It's like, whoa! I mean, huge flares goes off on a planet you're kind of whizzing by, or maybe even just taking notes on, worth more of an investigation. So that was 45 when that happened. About almost 10 years later, you meet with the leader of the country who set those bombs off, because they are apparently the apex country on the planet with that capability. One group tells Eisenhower, no nukes, and we'll give you all the special starship and alien technology you can hope to have. We'll get you up to speed to where we are, but no nukes. The other group says, keep your nukes. We'll give you a UFO to play with. It's the equivalent of our Model T, but you'll get a kick out of it, and you'll probably be able to reverse engineer a bunch of stuff. Well, long after we had nuclear tests out in the desert. And sorry, I did stray with the Eisenhower story a little bit, but it comes into play in a sec. We did nuclear tests out in the desert. Remember thinking it's a desert. It's already dead out there, but for a few cactus, turtles, and a couple of coyotes and snakes and scorpions. Big deal. That was the attitude. what no one really realized until a bit later, especially in the 50s, nuclear material and radiation drifts with the jet stream, which travels west to east. So what's happening to America's? Because right next door to those testing grounds, geographically speaking, is the grain belt. Okay, all of our crops are grown in the middle of the country for the most part. Oh my gosh. Okay, we irradiated. Did we do damage to our food supply? To our groundwater supply? We gotta test it to find out how we're gonna test it. Well, the aliens want to take samples and of human stuff, and they said, can we get in on that? Because we need to test, for all this fallout. And that's where your cattle mutilations come in. Now, I say that with a minor, well, not minor, with something of a caveat. It was thought at least to be aliens at first, because they were cutting things with laser-like precision, no blood anywhere on the ground, and the cuts and removal of these things were done with cauterization. We had lasers at our disposal back then. If anything, at least in the early days, the 50s and 60s, give or take, we did have lasers. They were honking huge, and wear a backpack and something akin to a car battery to power it, or something along those lines. But we did have them. In the 60s, devices got smaller. So I think the aliens handled the bulk of that for a while. Again, this is pure supposition. This is educated guesswork. But I think the humans started taking over. And that's where he starts seeing service people, or at least they look like service people, working with the aliens. Because I think over time it's been a gradual handoff to where humans and drones and black helicopters and the like are sending teams out, still doing the testing to this day. And on that note, I'm going to highly, super highly recommend you watch the amazing and certainly educational and very much, well, one of the better documentaries on the UFO experience, called The Experiencers Full Disclosure. For my money, the subtitle Full Disclosure is a bit of a misnomer, but because they don't put it all together, they do a lot of supposition, but at the same time, you hear the experiences from the experiencer's mouth, and I think that's highly important. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for bearing with me, my old technological issues here. But it has been an absolute pleasure. And as always, my name is Tim Sedano. This has been Paranormal Insight, and we will see you next week. Take care. If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com.